Chapter 2. Meriaus climbed up the last set of stone stairs and sat down at the top, breathing heavily, clutching his chest. He was totally exhausted from climbing up what seemed an endless number of stairs. After regaining his breath partially, he looked up and squinted his eyes to protect them against the setting sun, sinking behind the lush green hill in front of him. He had been climbing for the past half hour, with very few and short breaks. Despite cursing the silent monks for living in a monastery on top of a ridiculously secluded hill, he had to admit that they had a phenomenal view to enjoy.
"Welcome back,"
a voice from behind greeted. Meriaus turned around and saw the abbot of the monastery with the blissful smile of a man who had not just climbed up a countless number of stairs. The abbot, who was named Finn, was a very fat man. This was rather unusual for a silent monk, who had given a vow of abstinence from earthly pleasures, and that meant sticking strictly to a very minimalistic diet. Meriaus was just itching to ask him about that, but the matter of the abbot's body shape seemed too personal. Finn was wrapped in meters and meters of bright red toga, traditional for the silent monks. He looked so content and welcoming that Meriaus understood instantly why these men had been left up to their own devices by rulers of the kingdom for literally thousands of years. "Abbot Finn," Meriaus greeted him back as he jumped to his feet swiftly. "How is the listening going?"
As well as always,"
Finn answered. The silent monks were named so because of their ancient practice to listen to the world around them so intently that, according to their teachings, one could hear the sounds coming from the galaxies nearby. "Heard any interesting gossip lately?" Meriaus made a joke and immediately regretted it from fear of offending this radiant man. But if the abbot was so easily offended, he wouldn't have been elevated to his current position.
"Ha ha! Well, sometimes we can't help but hear this or that, but we mostly ignore gossip and focus on the sound of nature."
He bowed to Meriaus slightly as a greeting, and Meriaus did the same. They began walking towards the monastery entrance.
"But I take it you have not returned to us so soon just to enjoy the view. There is another reason. I have a feeling the nature of your second visit in such a short period of time is not of a spiritual one."
The abbot concluded in a soft voice, almost a whisper. He had such a relaxing effect on the people around him. "I am afraid not." Meriaus conceded and stopped in his tracks. Finn also paused and turned to face his confidant. The commander continued. "I spoke with the Lord and I explained the situation as best as I could. He is adamant. He wants you to give up control and adhere to his command. That would hardly disrupt your day-to-day life. I honestly would advise you to do what he says. It will save you a lot of problems." The abbot sighed heavily and looked around at the area surrounding the entrance of his domain. It was a gorgeous day. The sky was brilliantly blue. The birds were blissfully unaware of politics or power struggles, and the lush trees were rustling softly in the light breeze.
"Do you see that nest, Commander?"
He signaled with a nod to a nearby tree.
"Are the birds in it required to give me their eggs because their nest is in my monastery? Of course not. We live and let live. We respect all beings and their non-destructive ways of life. Why then is the Lord forcing us to do what is against nature?"
"I think you are misunderstanding the situation. He doesn't want any of your possessions, trust me," Meriaus assured him. "This is merely let's call it a formality."
"He has taken many things from many people under the guise of this formality."
"I see you truly can learn a lot by listening," Meriaus observed with slight admiration in his eyes. "Yes, technically he will be entitled to anything you own, but between me and you, he already is far more powerful than any other person in the world. He is essentially offering you the easy way of doing things."
"Indeed. I will have to think on this."
She gingerly walked up the mountain road as she usually did. She was accustomed to this, taking flowers and pastries to the abbot and his high priests. She would never forget how the abbot assisted her grandmother all those years ago, when she was a sickly young woman. "Abbot Finn!" she called, Now seeing he was in the presence of another man, she gasped, "Oh my, I'm so sorry." Both Meriaus and the abbot turned to see the young woman. They were sitting and having a natural herbal tea together, grown and brewed directly from the monastery garden. The notion that Meriaus was even offered such a beverage spoke to the closeness he had with the abbot and his brothers. In fact, Meriaus admired them. These thousands of years, holding their own against the desires of several lords of Gramadon, and now the ultimate king of the land. And using what? Nothing but peace and providing information of the universe to the curious lords. Meriaus wondered why his own lord did not care for their wisdom. Perhaps it was that his origins were still widely unknown to his followers, and he believed he knew more than these faithful monks.
"It's all right, Jessica."
The abbot waved over to the shamefaced girl.
"Please come sit with us. I was just telling my good friend Meriaus about the good-hearted people of the village."
He pointed to Meriaus with a wink. He knew it was a tale to let the girl feel better about the interruption.
"You live long, my child, since we were practically talking about you just before you showed up."
Jessica blushed. "Thank you, Abbot Finn. I've brought some pastries for your good self and the brothers. The flowers to add to your wonderful garden. I hope it pleases the monastery." She was beautiful, Meriaus thought. Plus, she was kind-hearted. Why would the Lord feel so threatened by the monastery and its influence on the people? Sometimes he truly wondered about his motives. However, he was the king, and was to be respected as such.
"It does, my dear. Thank you for this,"
the abbot replied, receiving the goods. "Grandma sends her regards. She wished she could make it, but the trip can sometimes have a toll on her."
"It's understandable, my child. Your grandmother has my blessings."
She nodded, acknowledging his favor. From an abbot, that was something to be held in high regard. She looked over to Meriaus and noticed his king's seal. "Hello, my good Lord Meriaus. I see you work with the king." She felt the need to say something disruptive, but then continued on a lighter note. "My sister actually works on the council. Imagine that. A woman in such a high place of his trustees. Her name is Tenaria Pascal. Do you know her?" Meriaus chuckled at the spunk of this woman, very smart and subtle in her insult of the king. Something she could not be condemned for, but a jab everyone could understand. "My dear lady, yes. I know Tenaria very well. We both knock heads on the council from time to time, but we all want the same thing. The best for the nation and its people." Jessica smirked. "I'm quite glad to hear that." Meriaus smiled. He knew Tenaria as close as someone could know a colleague. A strong and fierce soldier who never mixed matters when it came to honor. Her family helped Gudrunn overtake the kingdom, and in return they were given position on the council. Tenaria was thought to be an only child, so she took up the role. However, Meriaus noted she never mentioned her family even once to him. Perhaps for good reason, not wanting the Lord to know about them. "I will send her your regards when I return, and I will ensure she travels back more often. She's such a dedicated soul, I would think her home was the palace." "I know, please do. Family misses her." Jessica scoffed. "I know traveling to bring flowers and pastries isn't high action, but sometimes I think the downtime would be good for her." They all shared in a hearty laugh and spoke some more about the kingdom, the monastery, and their thoughts on events of the land. Finally, it was time for Jessica to head back down the mountain trail. "It was very nice meeting you, Meriaus." She nodded and he nodded back. "Abbot Finn, bless you. Next time I come, I shall bring Grandma, I promise." With that, she was on her way. Both men watching the girl leave in the distance, the abbot broke the silence.
"You have a way with our country folk, Lord Meriaus,"
he observed.
"They feel very comfortable and happy around you."
"Your conclusion based on my interaction with one woman, Abbot," Meriaus responded.
"We've known each other for some time. In the grand scheme of things, a short space of time. But enough time for me to learn what kind of man you are."
Abbot Finn replied as he turned to Meriaus.
"And I can tell the sign of a born leader."
Meriaus was shocked. The abbot was accustomed to speaking his mind, but he had to be careful to speak out of turn. He was speaking to a man on the king's council, after all. "Surely you jest." Did you place some intoxicating flowers in that tea we had earlier? The abbot smiled and lightened the mood.
Perhaps I did, Lord. But know this. Had there been a request to show loyalty and join the kingdom under different circumstances, we may have had a shorter and more pleasant conversation on it.
He put his cup in the air.
And would have more time for tea.
The abbot waved at Meriaus as he walked down the long flight of stairs to return to his horse at the foot of the hill. Finn's smile dimmed a bit, and he hastily headed off to the big room in the monastery. There he found the 13 high priests sitting on the floor with their legs crossed. They were in deep meditative prayer. Finn went around them without making a sound. The floor was covered with a soft mat. He walked over to the big crystal-clear disc hanging from a frame and picked up a big gold hammer. The abbot aimed for the center and carefully hit the see-through gong once with a well-practiced movement. The ring hung in the air and made the dust particles shake in their place for a moment or two. One by one, the 13 priests woke up and focused their gaze on the abbot.
Brothers, we have to make a decision.
Regarding whether or not we accept the Lord's rule over our monastery?
Inquired one of the men.
No, that is decided. For the sake of survival and preserving our sanctuary, we will have to accept him as our Lord, as have done countless other sovereign areas. The decision we are faced with is regarding the dragonet's egg.
The room fell. It was always silent, but now the silence was tense.
I think,
said one of the priests in deep consideration,
him having the egg would not be a good thing.
Of course not. That is precisely why I woke you from meditation. He is too power-hungry, too powerful as it already is. We have to hide it somewhere. If he were to add dragonets to his arsenal, it would be almost impossible to ever stop him. And such imbalance of power is never a good thing. It leads only to catastrophe.
Where do you propose we hide the egg?
In one of the caves in the mountain. Even if he found out about our plan, it would take him longer than any lifetime to search all of the caverns to find it.
What about the stasis? Won't it hatch if we move it?
Asked Brother Seng, a priest at the far end of the room.
We will set up the new stasis area in the cavern we choose as a hiding place, and then move the egg, of course, Brother Seng. We start looking for a hiding place immediately.